Perfect. Okay, good morning, good evening, good whatever to everyone. Thanks so much for joining. I see a few faces or names that I don't recognize, which is great. So we've got a few items on the agenda. We've got an upcoming KEDA release coming on. There's been a lot of progress on some of the V2 work that I know Zibyanek's been working on. I don't see him on the call yet. I see Ahmed here. And we're also, I think I mentioned doing the release. So maybe to start with, we can just go around very quickly and just do a quick intro. If this is your first time joining, welcome. Just say your name. You can say where you work if you want. And then just let me know as we go around if there's any specific items that you're interested in discussing today as a group. And I'll make sure to keep adding them to the agenda. And if you're just here to listen and hang out, then that's cool too. So I will start first. So I'm Jeff. I work at Microsoft, one of the KEDA maintainers. Yeah, I don't have anything to cover today. I can give an update if we have time on the maintainer PR that I opened this week, but we can go from there. Tom, I see you just joined with your beautiful sunny outside. I'll let you introduce yourself next.
Good evening, good morning. My name is Tom Kerkel. I work for Codit as an Azure architect.
Perfect, thank you. Let me type in the list here. I don't think I know how to spell attendees, so someone can correct that. So we have Jeff, Tom, Israel. I saw you ping me. I actually haven't even opened the ping yet, so I'll let you, if there was something you wanted to chat today, you can just introduce it here.
No problem. Thank you, Jeff. So hi, everyone. My name is Israel, and I'm from Microsoft.
Great. And did you have anything you wanted to chat about today, or just joining back in?
It's been a while since I've participated. So I think about a month or 2 months. So I wanted to find out what has changed, because it looks like there was a proposal to modify the schedule and also the time of day that the meetings take place.
Yeah, that's right.
So I was a bit confused about that.
Yes, we can cover that. We did cover that last week. We wondered if it would make sense for us to shift the time of this meeting. We talked about a few options. We thought about maybe bumping it up an hour. We are already meeting every other week now. I think there wasn't strong consensus for either. I think I'll have downsides, especially once life normalizes, whenever that is. Then a few folks, if we moved it up an hour, won't be able to join because they'll have like school drop off. So we can sync on that again. I meant to send a survey on the Slack channel, but I forgot. So Anirudh, I'll let you go next.
Hi, I'm Anirudh. I work for Microsoft in the Azure Functions serverless space, and I've been a part of KEDA from the beginning, and one of the maintainers.
Any items from you, Anirudh, or just I guess the release stuff that you and Satish will be working on?
Yeah, so we are going to Satish. We are just going to start the release process today, and I think that's. I don't think I have anything more. I'm interested to know more about how the V2 work is going. So looking forward to that.
So we'll go Ahmed next, and then we can go to Zibyanek, who can he probably has the most on the V2. So Ahmed, anything from you?
Not much from me. I'm Ahmed. I work for Microsoft as well. I work with Jeff and Eric. But no, I don't have anything else. So.
Oh, yes. And I know this is a little bit on the spot. I meant to ping you earlier. I know you've been chewing on a potential proposal. I was actually mentioning this to Zibyanek before about a new scaler. Do you want to chat about that today, or should we do that in like an upcoming sync?
Let's do it in an upcoming sync. I want to write the document first that I would share in an issue, and then people can read it. And then in an upcoming sync, we can talk about it more in detail.
Great. We'll do that. Yeah, my bad. So I think that works great, especially we've got a few folks on the line. Zibyanek, do you want to
go? Yes. Hello, my name is Zibyanek. I'm from Red Hat. I'm working on KEDA, on the V2 branch specifically. So just a short update. We made some progress over there. Ahmed did some refactoring on that, which is great. So from my point of view, like the main functionality for the scaled object is pretty much done. The next main item is the scaled object. So we should probably discuss whether we want to do some changes in the scaled object specification, so it could be implemented then according to the specification. I'm not sure if there are.
Do you mean skill job?
What do you mean? Sorry.
Do you mean skill job or?
Yeah, scale job. Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay,
Yes.
great. Yeah, we'll chat about that. Thanks, Evyanek. Okay, let me grab, I'm looking at my list. It jumps around a bit. Rajasa, I see you on the line if you want to do a quick intro.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Rajasa or RJ. I'm also working with Microsoft. I'm from a team that does code with customers. And so I've got some, essentially some use cases that I can share and talk through.
Sweet. Awesome. Oh, cool. I see the agenda is, this is a different one. So I'm going to pop in up here and we'll say Rajasa use cases. Okay. Abhishek, do you want to do a quick intro?
Sure thing. Hi, everyone. My name is Abhishek. Work for Microsoft as a developer advocate. I just want to gauge some, check if there is any interest in the Redis Streams proposal, a new scaler potentially. Issue 746.
Great.
I just want to check on that.
Great. Awesome. Yep. We'll cover that for sure. Let me see. Amit.
Hello, everyone. I'm Amit Ganesh. I just wanted to contribute more for KEDA and just hanging out here, like just know what's happening. Basically, even I wanted to discuss about the scaled object spec. I'll grab more about that. That's it from my end.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for joining. Let's see here. Rahul.
Hey guys, Rahul Marathe here. I work in the Microsoft sales team. I'm in technical sales and wanted to check whether KEDA is the right solution if I want to scale out my Kubernetes cluster based on incoming FTP requests. And also, I see on the agenda here from March 19, there's a line item around HTTP scaling. So wanted to know whether it is possible to scale out or scale in based on incoming HTTP requests.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep, perfect. Thanks for joining, Rahul. Well, we should be able to jump to that at the end, and if not, we could grab it up on Slack too. Great questions, and I think we've had some discussion about it in the past. Okay, going through. I think we have everyone except for Travis.
Hi, I'm Travis. I'm with Shutterstock. We're interested in possibly using KEDA. Currently working on a POC, and I'm really here just to listen and I guess get an idea about version 2 and what's coming up in 1.4 release.
Great. Awesome. Thanks for joining, Travis. Yeah, feel free to jump in if you have any questions. And I've got an eye on chat too, or if folks want to raise their hands as we go too, because we do have a few folks on the call today. So thanks everyone for joining. So with that, I think we've got a good agenda set. Let's jump right into it. The first one is the KEDA 1.4 release. Ahmed, do you want to give a quick update on that? And I'll open up what like the commit log looks like for since our last release. Honored. I can too.
Oh, sorry. I thought you said Emma.
I probably did because whenever I'm tired, I keep mixing up your names.
Yeah.
And so I would not be surprised if I did.
It's absolutely all right. It's fine. I wish I was half as smart as Ahmed, but so that's a different matter. The only thing is that, so we're going to start the release today. And hopefully we will get it done by tomorrow. That's our goal. I have candidly not looked at the commits, so I'm not sure what else is being included here.
Yeah, so I see our last cut was on March 12th. And so we've got a few updates and readmes. It looks like a typo, some improvements to the AWS authentication, the bug fix in Azure Monitor, a leak with some of the scalers, a few more governance type stuff around how we now do DCO, which I ran into personally with my PR. Yeah, it looks like a few bug fixes. I don't see anything big in terms of features or new scalers that are in this one. So yeah, it looks like just a pretty minor release. Some improvements to RabbitMQ, and some label stuff. So yeah, pretty minor stuff. We'll funnel it up in the changelog as Tom mentioned too. So we'll kind of roll up some of those commits into the changelog here, and then also the releases on GitHub. So as was mentioned, we're starting that today. So pretty soon we should have that one up for release. And for those who have joined before, we're trying a release schedule of every 4 weeks. So that would mean we'll release this week, and then 4 weeks from now we will do the 1.5 release of whatever gets in from here to there, which might include a new Redis stream scaler or some functionality there. So any questions or comments on 1.4 before we move on to V2? Great. All right, so V2, Zbigniew, you mentioned already you've made a bit of progress here. I don't know if there's any issues to update. We talked some last week about one of the goals we have for V2 was to make scaling multiple resource types more flexible. And so today we allow you to scale deployments and scale jobs, but we get a few requests to do things like, hey, can I scale Argo deployments? And should objects and jobs really be the same thing, or should we split them apart? And if I remember from our discussion last week, we are going to split up scaled objects and scaled jobs. And I assume, Zbigniew, from your update, you're saying that most of the scaled object changes to make it more flexible so that you could deploy or scale like a stateful set or an Argo deployment or a deployment. It sounds like that might be what you finished off last week. Is that accurate? And you can just kind of pick it up from there.
Yes, exactly. You covered it exactly. Yeah, that's like it.
Great. So the biggest one then is the scaled job spec. And did you say there were any kind of questions there? Should we look at the existing one, or I don't know if there's a proposal floating around somewhere?
Yeah, probably we can look at the existing like spec on the KEDA web page.
Yep.
I know, or I can recall there were some some requirements, but I'm not sure what was it. Maybe Tom can chime in.
I can't remember.
Yeah, I know, like for the most part, I think this job target ref, these are just lifted straight from like the job spec of Kubernetes. So these are all things that make sense to surface, because it's like when we create the job, these are the settings you should send to Kubernetes. I know the one weird thing to me, and I even am not even super clear where it landed, is when you go the approach of like a queue, and you're like, I'm going to have a queue and I want to drop in 100 messages and I want to spin up a job for each message. And you never want it to have more than like 10 jobs at once. When I look at this spec, would assume that I would set parallelism to 10 and that would stop it from doing it. And that's actually not the case. And it's not, I don't even think it's max replica count either. If I remember right, there was some weird behavior, maybe this was a bug, where if I look at like the scaler for queue, it would actually be the queue length that it's looking at. And it's looking at like this number right here. And that's how many jobs it spins up, which to me, it wasn't what I expected. So I don't know if that's by design today. That would be the only thing that as we move into V2, I would love it if it was a bit more clear on which one of these, like what does parallelism do? Maybe it's an advanced feature. What does match replica count do? And what does like the queue length thing do? And how do those work together in a way that it is at least well documented? I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that or even could explain what the existing behavior is.
Okay, I think that we can, I will probably create an issue for this, and we can like gather like the requirements or the improvements, because I recall there were some, but I don't remember. So maybe I will look it up later. So we can start in that issue and maybe go from there.
Yep, I think that's perfect. I think that's a great next step.
Yeah, the other thing for the V2 was basically at the moment there is a very limited way how to scale the deployment based on multiple triggers, or we can do it on multiple scalars. We can do it, but the behavior is not ideal, I would say. So there were some discussions about capping the maximum number of replicas and etc. So we did some conversation on the issues. So I'm not sure if the guy who requested it isn't here, but probably this is the other topic that we can discuss or we can improve in the V2.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, and this was the second issue, that basically if we use multiple scalars, like most of the scalars basically share the metric name. So the metric name is used for the HPAs to scale the deployments. So if we deploy scaled object that consists of, for example, two triggers, and both triggers are using the same metric name, the scaling won't work correctly. So we need to change this. So we need to probably generate some unique metric name or something like that. This is issue. I can tell you the issue number.
It's issue 733.
Yeah, exactly. So this is good item for the V2 for another improvement from my point of view.
And this is independent of jobs or not. It's just in general, if you have multiple scalars, we need to.
Yes. And then there was the other request for some scalars to introduce something like starting threshold. So basically, you can define basically, for example, for the Kafka, you can define like that lag threshold. So basically, threshold based on what you want to scale. And there was a request to basically introduce something like a start threshold. So, for instance, you want to scale your first replica when there is one message, but scale the other like replicas on different amount of yeah. This is it.
Yeah, interesting. It makes sense. So it's almost like the hope here is that we'd have some pattern for you to say, don't spin up the first replica until some threshold is hit, and then after that, it just publishes the HPA target based on the lag threshold. So maybe one is a bad example here. I could see it being more like, hey, I want to scale for every 100 messages, but don't even start scaling from 0 until I have 1,000 things on the queue. And then it will wait for the Kafka stream to have 1,000 unprocessed message before it even activates. Is that accurate?
Yes. I think so. Yes. So basically, we can implement this for some scalars. This is not dependent on the scaled object itself. So we can implement these features for the scalars that we all see the need.
I see. So it's maybe not a KEDA core specific item. It would be a pattern that we could introduce that scalars optionally could introduce as they do like the is active thing.
Yes.
I see. Yeah, it makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, I like the idea. So maybe that is something that I'll move it to the V2 milestone for now, so that when we kind of do these things, we keep an eye on it. I'll pop help wanted on it, and then I'll keep this open and I'll try to add a little discussion, which is like I'm thinking like when we do the V2 change set, if even though this isn't necessarily coupled to V2, we could in theory make this backwards compatible. But we were kind of like, hey, as part of V2, we're introducing this new pattern too called start threshold. And that way, when folks start contributing scalars, maybe it's something that we enforce, or maybe we even say all scalars have to support this property. I don't know. I don't know if folks have thoughts on if we do this, how we should roll it out.
Yeah, maybe there is one more point to this. So what you described is maybe something different than the guy is requesting in the issue. I think that he wants to start like the scaling when there is, for example, one message in the queue, but not like scale to the other replica like until there is 100 messages.
Oh, so is the behavior today that if I just did this today and I had lag threshold of 100, if there was one message, it wouldn't activate?
I guess he's requesting something like this. Or maybe I'm like getting it wrong. So
no, I think you might be right, because that would. Sorry, go ahead. Someone else.
I was just going to say, I haven't seen this actually. Even if the lag threshold is, let's say, 100, if I have even one message, I see the pod spinning up. But I could
Agree.
verify it again with
Why
some
would
tests.
you want to do that, actually? Just wait
So
until there's
usually,
100. No,
so usually
I'm
with Kafka, yeah, the scenarios that I've worked with Kafka as well as Event Hub, they are mostly real near real-time streaming scenarios. So where the customer is really looking for processing messages as soon as they show up. So in such cases, they wouldn't want to wait till a batch of 100 messages is accumulated, and they would just want real-time processing right out of the gate.
I fully agree. I'm more wondering why he wants to wait.
I think I understand it now, actually, that helps. So I think the scenario is sometimes he'll get 10,000 messages. And in that case, he wants it to scale based on this number, the 100. Sometimes he might just get 10 messages. And if it still scaled by this one, the HPA would only give him one instance. But he's saying in that case, if it's greater than this number, but less than this one, he wants it to honor the lesser one. So if you only had 10 messages and you set it to 1, it would burst really quickly for the small batch and process them very quickly. But it was a massive batch, it wouldn't go nuts. So I think, so the scaler would have to lie to the HPA about the metric value when it was greater or equal to the start threshold, but less than the lag threshold. So the feature request is actually more around like having the scaler know, is there a ton of work or a little bit of work? And I want to scale differently based on those two options, which is very different than when I assumed. And I'm less confident on that one. I get what the intent is, but I don't know the right way to expose it. So maybe we park it for now. I can update this issue, but I'm okay with it. Like if somebody builds this capability, it probably is still, because it's up to each individual scaler to publish the target. So it would still be a scalar specific work item. I just am trying to wrestle around like what's the right name for this property and how would we expose it in a way that makes sense that you have like this bursty number if it's a small thing. So anyone's willing to chime in there, but that makes a little bit more sense to me, at least what's being requested. Okay. Any other comments on V2 stuff we should flag here, Zibyanek?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Great. This is a great one, Tom. I didn't even think about this as an option. Move stand-up to the YouTube account. So, Tom, I'll let you kind of cover what you were thinking here.
Apparently, there's a YouTube account who has all the stand-ups for all the projects. I think it's that link. So maybe we should check if we should publish the recording as part of that or not.
Yep, agree. We have been. And does it have it for projects too? Because I know this is where they do like their SIG stand-ups, but like, would I see a Helm stand-up on this page?
Yeah, so if you have a look, the service mesh interface is also already there, and they even have a playlist with all the stand-ups. So yeah, they also just recently joined. So
great. Yep, I agree. Like right now, we've been publishing them to our YouTube channel, which is very one-off, and so I love the idea of publishing to a channel that's got a bit more power to help get the word out more. So yeah, that's awesome. Any thoughts on the next step here? Should we just ping our CNCF friends and say like, hey, can you give us knowledge on how to do this? I'm happy to help with this one.
Yeah, I think that should be. I think the service desk would be the best bet.
Yeah, let me assign this to me then. And I'm going to add a to-do item because I have a few assigned to me. Do the YouTube thing for KEDA. Great.
Best description ever.
Yeah, I'll know what I mean. Okay.
Again, I wanted to talk about the V2 stuff. So about basically multiple scalars. So the idea is to like whenever we have an external metric, it's hard-coded for the scaler. Something like Kafka scaler has lag threshold as the metric name. So ideally, I was thinking if we can have a way to in the scaled object to mention what should be the name of the external metric, or if they don't give, then generate a metric name on our own. So that was the plan. So I was wondering, how do we what shall I name it as metric name, or should it be more specific? I want to discuss on that name. What should be what should be like the key in the scaled object that should be there?
Yep. I personally think metric name sounds great. I think your description is awesome. I think the feature sounds good. Anyone else have any thoughts on what this thing is called that you would set to override the metric name we published to the HPA?
I think it's correct. I think this option should be part of the triggers, like not directly in the spec, but it should be like in the triggers section of the scaled object.
So yeah, let me make sure I'm thinking correctly. So if I look at the scaled object spec today, why is it not what I wanted it to show? You have triggers here, and then there's metadata, which I'm not showing right now. Would this potentially be a peer to metadata? So it would say like a metric name below the metadata property?
Yep.
Yeah. I think that's a great suggestion. Any other thoughts or agreement?
For Kafka, like I've implemented, I've tested, and I can test a bit of them, but I'm not sure how to test any other. I don't know how to test Azure Monitor, or I don't have access to go ahead with any of them. How do I do that? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the two easiest ones to test with, because we've got quick starts from both, would be Kafka and RabbitMQ. If you have an image, if you like publish an image of KEDA, you can even just ping me on Slack or something and say like, hey, and I've got a few tests spun up. I can just modify my cluster and pull in your custom image, and I can run a few tests. But I'm confident that if it works for RabbitMQ and Kafka, that it will work for all the other scalars too. I assume based on where you'll be writing the code. I don't think it's scalar specific necessarily. So I'm happy to help here to do a smoke test for you to make sure it works for a few other ones that I've got some demos around.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yep. No problem. Great. Thank you for bringing that. Any other questions on this one? And are you cool if I assign you to this as well? I see you've already been pretty involved in this issue. I don't know if you wanted to, it sounds like you're actually coding it up right now. So I can just assign the issue to you officially.
Yeah, yes, please assign it to me.
Thank you, Amit. That's awesome. Really appreciate it. Yeah, feel free. I keep an eye on the Slack channel too. So if you run into any issues and maybe I'm not being as responsive or someone isn't here, feel free to just flag us on Slack and it will ping my phone. And unfortunately, my GitHub notifications are too noisy now that I almost just can't rely on them. But Slack is not.
Please, sorry. And if you could please like do this work like based on the V2 branch. So like I suppose we want to have this functionality not in the V1 but in the V2. So if you could rebase the thing.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that.
And should we, I'm fine with that too. Is this because it's a new feature, should we just do this on both and just backwards it to V1? Or do you think it's easier at this point that we just make it V2 only?
I don't know. I think that V2 only is good. Like if we like, this will force the users to switch to V2. So
sure. And
I'm open to anything.
And I assume based on the progress we're making, we're probably thinking like V2 around May, June, or more like June, July. I mean, so I don't think that's crazy to have someone hold off who's done with this. Amit, do you have any thoughts yourself?
No issues. Like, yeah.
Cool.
No, I don't have any issues either.
Cool. Great. All right. Let's go with that then. Okay, so moving on to scalars in general. I know there was specific interest from some folks on the call. I can't remember who wanted to talk about the Redis streams one. Tom, I don't know if that's the one you want to start with, or there was anything else too you wanted to bring up on scalars.
Yep, but since the man himself is on the call, I'll leave it up to him.
Great.
Hey, sure, I can talk about this. So right now, KEDA has a Redis list-based scalar, and I thought it might be interesting to have one for Redis streams as well. Conceptually, this is a little different because in Redis stream, in the object itself, it's like an append-only log. So essentially, you have to use something called appending entries list using this specific command. I thought that can form the basis of a criteria for scaling your deployment based on if they were consuming off a Redis stream. So that's the idea.
I see.
Yeah, so it's to be honest, this is very similar to Redis lists in terms of implementation, like the same authentication mechanism. It's just that the command which we use in order to fetch the lag, it differs. And there are a few caveats which I mentioned in my second comment. If you can scroll down, please. But that is more with respect to because this is like a streams data structure. This is potentially unlimited. It's like a append-only log. But this is more from a consumer, development standpoint, and how KEDA is not essentially, or the scaling process may or may not be related to this. So, just some comments if anyone has feedback or inputs on this. But by and large, from a conceptual standpoint, I think it should work on the basis of pending items for a specific consumer group within a Redis stream. So it is sort of somewhere in between a Kafka consumer group and a Redis list.
Very cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll pause here if there's any questions, and I can chime in or thoughts on this scaler.
Hey, Abhishek. So does the streaming work similar to Kafka? Is the idea the same of checkpoints and
yeah, it's same and different at the same time. It's similar, I would say. The key difference is that Redis streams sort of takes upon itself to manage the state of each consumer. So in Kafka, so there is a consumer group, but you can have individual consumer instances come and go. There's no like restriction on that. But Redis streams, what it tells you that you'll have to have a unique consumer instance within a group, and a Redis stream will store some state on behalf of that consumer instance. So I have an application which is mapped to a consumer group, say for example application A, and I have say 5 instances to scale out to share the processing load. Those instances have to be unique, and Redis streams will store some state on the server side, on the Redis side itself. So that has some implications in terms of, say, reprocessing messages and dealing with failure scenarios, so on and so forth. One of these I've mentioned in the comment as well. If you see the second item, what if instance fails? So yes, it is conceptually similar, but implemented differently within Redis streams, if I were to summarize this, as opposed to Kafka.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. It sounds good though too, and I think some of even the call out you have here, where it's like the consumer has to act, or else there's the risk that it's going to keep increasing and KEDA is going to keep scaling. That's pretty consistent with how KEDA works in general with Kafka, for example. So I think this is awesome. I didn't even realize there were hooks that we could dig into the Redis streaming protocol. So I personally think the proposal here and the caveats also really good.
Awesome, thank you.
And then were you interested, is this one I should flag for help wanted, and we can see if someone in the community wants to pick this up, or do you want to try to take a whack at this?
I can pick this up for sure.
Great, that's awesome. Man, Redis can do so much more than I ever realized. That thing's just chugging along.
I know, that's Redis 6.0 is on and is in the queue, so there's some cool stuff coming in there too.
That's cool. Great. Awesome. Any other scalers? Tom, is this the main one? Just want to make sure before we move on. Oh, SMI.
Yes. So we have somebody who's working on the SMI one.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw some questions on Slack. They were wondering about which SDK to use.
Yep.
But that will be a very good one to have as well. Great. Oh, awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so Israel dropped off already. He had to drop off for another meeting at the half-hour mark. I guess I kind of mentioned this at the outset. We were evaluating if we should move times. I don't know if anyone, because we've got a few folks who are on this call who weren't on 2 weeks ago, if anyone just kind of wants to throw in if we should definitely move. I think the easiest one for most of our team would be moving an hour earlier than what we're doing and still doing it every other week. But I personally can make most any time work. So I'll just kind of pause here in case anyone wants to chime in on that ongoing discussion this week.
The European folks would like to have it earlier.
And is an hour enough, or would would an hour be significantly different, or would it be like 2 hours or 3 hours would actually be the good one?
1 hour would be good for me.
Wow. Okay, great. Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, same for me. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, we might do this then, because this has popped up. So I wonder if in terms of next steps, I'm fine if we go to 9. Personally, I think I mentioned there's the serverless working group that meets at 9 to 10, but I usually don't have to attend those anyway, because they're focused very much on cloud events, which I'm less involved in.
For now,
for
they're
now,
changing. Yeah.
Oh, sure, they might switch topics. Yeah, so that could make it a little bit tricky, but I'm open to it, and we could always adjust again. So maybe I'll pop in the Slack channel. I will do it this week, because I'm going to add a to-do list item. Do the time of KEDA thing on Slack. I'll post a message on Slack and see if folks are okay with the 9 a.m. and then maybe we can move it. We won't plan on changing next meeting because I want to give at least a meeting's notice, but next meeting might be our last one at 10 a.m. Pacific time. We'll see. Okay, great. Rajasa, you mentioned you had a few use cases. I don't know if there's anything you just want to kind of share high level with the group here, and then we can go to the Rahul's questions around cluster autoscaling and HTTP.
Sure. So on my end, actually, apart from the use cases, there was also this small issue that I'm seeing with HPA, which I wanted to share. I did not raise it on the KEDA forum yet, but I probably should have with more details. So the use case that I want to share is about a customer. We are looking to create log streaming and scaling and doing some processing or parsing logic on some logs that they are getting from syslog. So they are getting the logs in Kafka protocol. We are passing them on to Event Hubs, and then using Event Hub scaler on KEDA to scale out Azure functions which are triggered using Event Hubs, and functions are deployed on AKS. Mm-hmm. So that's the scenario, and based on the processing, the output from the Azure functions would either go to an output Event Hub or a dead letter Event Hub. So that's the kind of end-to-end scenario. Finally, going out back into Azure Sentinel for further processing of the processed messages.
Sure.
So that's the kind of end-to-end pipeline that we're looking at. What I'm seeing though right now is my HPA is currently kind of stuck with the number of messages in the queue. So even though I do not see any pods actively processing messages, my HPA is stuck looking at a value saying that there are more number of messages in the queue, and that's why it does not automatically scale down my pods. I'm not sure if anyone has seen the scenario, or is this something I was hoping to kind of get an idea of what I could try to debug this issue further.
Yeah, and if I understand right, there are active containers, there's active replicas that are processing event hubs. So they're chugging along doing something. But KEDA, when it's doing its check on how much work is required, it's seeing that like, oh, it looks like there's no messages here, which is potentially throwing off the scale. Is that right?
Right. The other way around, only thing is that even if there are no messages in the event hubs currently that are yet to be processed, my HPA is still thinking that there are messages in the queue, and that's why it does not scale down. So another thing that I tested is even with the HPA in this kind of state, even if I add in more messages in my event hubs, my pods that are already created start processing those messages further ahead. So it's not that it's in a stuck or a limbo state. My pods can go ahead, but my HPA doesn't seem to drain out, or it's not getting the right value for the number of messages. And I was wondering if this could happen if I had any other local instances of let's say Azure functions running and consuming from the same event hub, but maybe not recording back the messages in the same checkpoint blob store.
It's a good question. I know behind the scenes how it works for functions
right.
is there's a storage account and it's writing checkpoints for each partition.
Yep.
And when you run it in the Azure Function Service, we name the storage account. Actually, it has nothing to do with the name of the function, I think. It's just using the consumer group name.
Yeah.
And so I am curious. Yeah, like I was wondering at first, maybe there was a world that it wasn't correctly writing the checkpoints back into storage, and that's why the scaler was thinking it was back earlier. But then when you said it resumes at the right spot, that was a bit strange. So definitely, if you had some conflicts between, especially if it was pointed to the same consumer group, I think things could get a little bit out of whack. It is one though that, yeah, if you end up creating an issue, there's nothing I can think of initially that would explain it directly.
So Rajesh had contacted me on Teams. I'm sorry for not responding before.
Oh, no worries, no
I
worries.
apologize. But one thing to check, I would imagine that we have a log which tells when the HPA goes and checks. So what does that log say, and what does the HPA actually see?
So I was trying to print what I see on my screen here for the HPA. I'm not able to paste the screenshot for some reason, but let me just print out. Yeah.
There is also a log which says get, is it active? This a function there, something like that in every scaler, right? Is active.
And I can totally understand if this is not the right forum to kind of discuss this. We could move to like an email or something, or the Slack channel to kind of debug this further. I just wanted to kind of bring this up to find out if someone has experienced something similar.
I think Rajesh, it's best to open an issue, and so that you can in the KEDA repo and just with all the logs and the details.
Right.
And then we can then there are more eyes on it as well.
Right, makes sense.
There is a
go ahead.
Sorry, I think if you turn on debug logs too, if you deploy KEDA with debug logs enabled, I thought there was a way that when you look at the log, it doesn't do it by default, but then at least for some scalers, when you turn on debug logs, I feel like I could see what the number KEDA scaler was getting, which ideally would map one-to-one what HPA is pulling from. But that could help too in terms of just debugging to get that issue open. But yeah, feel free to ping me as well if you have any trouble with this. It sounds like something that I've spent a ton of time with event hubs. So I'm happy to see if there's anything we can do to help unblock.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great. Okay, so that brings us to the last one from Rahul around cluster auto scaling. And if I understand right, there's kind of two things in here. One is KEDA today is focusing on horizontal pod auto scaling, which means you have a cluster with like 5 nodes and a bunch of events come in and we make sure that we're scaling out replicas within those 5 nodes well. And I think the first half of your question was, could we have KEDA driving the scaling of the entire cluster? So maybe you don't need to go from 2 replicas to 8 replicas alone, but you also need to go from 5 nodes to 10 nodes. And then I think the second one related to it was, and what if the event is actually HTTP and it's not something like Event Hubs or RabbitMQ or Kafka? Is that a fair statement, Rahul? Anything else you'd want to add?
Yeah, on the first use case, my question is a bit different. So I want to know, if I want to scale out based on FTP requests, incoming requests, is it even possible, or is it the right technology, to do that? So the scenario here is, for one of my customers, they process like around 1 million FTP files, let's say, within a couple of hours. And they wanted to know whether it is possible to first move the infrastructure to the FTP infrastructure to Kubernetes, which looks like it is possible. But the next question is, how do you scale out when you get this burst of incoming FTP requests?
Yep, makes sense. So I think I'll take a stab at this and I'll let others jump in. Nothing in FTP, right? Like file transfer protocol is the one that they're looking to use.
Yeah.
So KEDA today doesn't have any way to scale directly on anything that is push or like request based. So that would be TCP, HTTP, gRPC, FTP directly. However, there's one pattern that may or may not help. There's a blog post here, which I can paste into chat. It's more around HTTP, but I think the pattern would work the same. In that how it works is if you can get metrics publishing from the FTP destination. So I imagine like in the cluster, there's some FTP server. I don't know if the FTP requests traverse through an ingress controller or even if the FTP server itself can emit metrics. The way that I have done this, and this blog post that I pasted does it as well, is that you actually create a scaled object based on Prometheus, and you scale based on the rate of events coming into Prometheus. So like I'm showing on my screen now, this is one that's HTTP triggered. So I have Nginx that publishes metrics to Prometheus every second saying, here's how many HTTP requests I'm processing. And then KEDA asks Prometheus, and it's like, hey, how many requests has this HTTP endpoint gotten in the last 5 seconds? And then based on that, it can actually start to scale out. This is in general a super common question. There's a few other options too. I don't know how they work with FTP. I'd have to rely on others on the call. But around these scenarios around HTTP in general, while KEDA doesn't do it today, it is something we're interested to see how we could make even the pattern I showed a bit more first class. The SMI spec work that was mentioned might help, but that's more related to service meshes. Knative serving does do scaling, but Zibyanek, I don't know if you know this. Would Knative serving do scaling for FTP, or would it have to be HTTP in that world?
It would have to be like HTTP. FTP, right. It's not covered.
Yeah, so that's kind of the generic ones that we kind of tell people of. KEDA directly, if you want it to do it, it's going to need to pull some other metric other than monitoring the FTP request directly. If it's HTTP, Knative serving could do it today. You could also do HTTP with this method. So I think this kind of pattern that the blog post shows, and you could ignore all the stuff about HTTP, but in general, using the Prometheus scaler, if you can get the data and metrics into Prometheus, might be your best bet. I don't know if that makes sense or if you have any follow-up questions on that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So I'll go and figure out whether it is possible to somehow publish the incoming request for FTP. And looks like if I can, this pattern would work.
Yes, exactly right. Yep. If you can get some metrics from the FTP, maybe the server itself, or from, I don't know if FTP goes through an ingress.
Could also be possible. If you're an Azure, you could also use that. Then you don't have to spin up a Prometheus instance.
If you have the FTP metrics in Azure Monitor, you mean?
Yeah.
Yep. That's great. That's a good call out. Okay. Does that help, Rahul?
Yeah, so it looks like, if I can get hold of the matrix that tells me the incoming request for FTP, what you are showing here on the screen, that would be the pattern. Okay, thank you.
Great, awesome. Yeah, and more on that too. And in fact, some of the scalar research Ahmed's been doing as a tease for 2 weeks from now has been these types of patterns. How do we make it work more seamlessly with KEDA, and ideally very simply, because this is probably the number one question I get around KEDA is around the HTTP scaling. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's all we had in the set agenda. We're at about 50 minutes in. Before we break, is there any other topic someone wants to flag or discuss before we all sign off?
Can you re-elaborate on the cluster autoscaling, what the scenario was, or was it just based on the HTTP request?
I think it was just FTP autoscaling. Okay. There was nothing around the cluster, right? Or did you also have a question around cluster, Rahul?
No, I did not.
Okay.
My question was around FTP.
Great.
Does anybody know if the cluster autoscaler works with custom metrics as well? No, it doesn't make sense. Never mind.
Well, the one I was going to point to, we do have this open issue, which I would love to get around to sometime, is around, is there a way we could integrate easier with the cluster autoscaler? It has 4 thumbs up, so 4 people like it. But yeah, this was a different one. There's some good discussion here from some folks around how this could work. So this is something I think someone would need to do some investigation on. I should say investigation. We don't have a label for that. But yeah, there is that separate one that I was talking about. There is an open issue on if there's anything we could do. And I think I discussed here, we can indirectly influence the cluster autoscaler today by forcing too many nodes or pods to be scheduled. But there has been asked, like, could we make that more direct?
No, I'm just wondering how we will be able to help with that. Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay, so thanks everyone a ton for joining for the discussion. As I mentioned, if you need something between now and 2 weeks from now, GitHub issues is great, and Slack is also where we're chatting about some of this stuff as well on the Kubernetes Slack channel that you can find on the KEDA landing page. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for this week. So thanks again, everyone. We'll chat again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. See ya.
Thank you.